The morning alarm blared through Naomi Brooks's small apartment. She groaned and reached for her phone, silencing it with a practiced tap. Another day, another dollar, or rather, another 2 jobs worth of dollars that still barely covered her bills. At 27, Naomi had hoped life would be different. She'd had plans once: college, a career in nursing, maybe even her own place that didn't have a leaky faucet and temperamental heating. But life had other ideas. She pushed herself up from her bed and padded to the tiny bathroom. The face that stared back at her in the mirror looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, testament to her late shift at Evergreen Assisted Living the night before. She splashed cold water on her face and tried to summon some energy. "Come on, Naomi," she told. Her reflection. Cafe shift starts in an hour. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was Tasha, her best friend since childhood and self-appointed guardian of Naomi's love life. "Don't forget, blind date tonight at 7, Le Jardin restaurant. Wear that blue dress. This one's different, I swear." Naomi sighed. Tasha had been trying to set her up for months, ever since Naomi's breakup with Marcus. 3 years together, and he'd left her for a dental hygienist with a trust fund. Before that had been Darnell, who'd borrowed money for his business idea and disappeared. And before him, Jason, who'd called her too intense when she talked about wanting stability. "I'm not going," she texted back. 3 dots appeared immediately. "Yes, you are. I already told him you'd be there. He's perfect for you. Works in finance, stable, kind, just your type." "That's what you said about the last one. This one feels different. Promise, just go. What's the worst that could happen?" Naomi knew better than to argue with Tasha. Once her friend got an idea in her head, she was like a dog with a bone. Besides, Naomi had the night off from both jobs, a rare occurrence. What else was she going to do, sit at home watching reruns and eating microwave dinners? "Fine," she replied, "but this is the last one. You'll thank me. Wear makeup," came Tasha's instant response. Naomi put down her phone and got ready for her cafe shift. Sunshine Cafe was a small, locally owned place near downtown Detroit. The pay wasn't great, but the tips were decent, and her boss, Gloria, was understanding about her schedule, juggling between here and the assisted living facility. "Morning, Gloria," Naomi called as she tied her apron around her waist. "Morning." "Honey," Gloria replied, her silver hair pulled back in its usual neat bun. "We've got a big order coming in at 10. Some meeting at the law firm across the street." The morning passed in a blur of coffee orders, muffins, and the occasional difficult customer. By the time her shift ended at 3, Naomi's feet were aching. But she still had to visit Mrs. Peterson. Mrs. Peterson was Naomi's favorite resident at Evergreen. At 87, with advancing dementia, the elderly woman often mistook Naomi for her daughter who had passed away years ago. Though not officially working today, Naomi still stopped by 3 times a week to spend time with her. "Hello, Mrs. Peterson," Naomi said, entering the tidy room with its collection of framed photos and knickknacks. "Sarah, you came to visit your mother?" Mrs. Peterson said, her face lighting up. Naomi didn't correct her. "I did. How are you feeling today?" "Oh, just fine. Did you bring Peter with you? Such a handsome husband you have." "Not today," Naomi said gently, sitting beside the elderly woman and taking her hand. "I thought we could look at your photo album." They spent an hour together, Mrs. Peterson telling the same stories about the photos that she always did, and Naomi listening as if hearing them for the first time. There was something soothing about the ritual, about being needed and appreciated, even if Mrs. Peterson didn't always remember who she really was. By the time Naomi left Evergreen, it was already past 5. The blind date was at 7, and she still needed to go home and change. The blue dress Tasha had mentioned was one they'd found at a thrift store last year, a simple A-line with cap sleeves that Naomi had to admit made her look good. But was that good enough for Le Jardin? The place was one of those upscale restaurants where the menu didn't even list prices. Back in her apartment, Naomi showered quickly and stood before her closet, doubt creeping in. This wasn't her world. She didn't belong in fancy restaurants with finance guys who probably spent more on their watches than she made in a month. "Just be yourself," she murmured, repeating Tasha's constant advice. But being herself hadn't exactly worked out so far. Being herself meant 2 jobs and a tiny apartment. Being herself meant dating men who saw her as either a challenge or a charity case. Still, she put on the blue dress, applied mascara and lip gloss, and twisted her hair into a neat updo. A pair of second-hand black heels completed the outfit. Looking in the mirror, she tried to see herself through a stranger's eyes. Would he think she was pretty? Would he be disappointed? Stop it, she told herself firmly. If he doesn't like you, that's his problem. She grabbed her purse and headed out, catching the bus downtown. Le Jardin was located in one of the newly renovated buildings that symbolized Detroit's attempts at Renaissance. Through the windows, she could see elegant table settings and well-dressed patrons. Her confidence wavered again. Taking a deep breath, Naomi pushed open the door and approached the hostess, a slender woman with an immaculate blonde bob who looked her up and down with barely concealed judgment. "I'm meeting someone," Naomi said, trying to keep her voice steady. "A blind date, I don't know his name." The hostess raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Do you have a reservation?" I'm not sure." Tasha hadn't mentioned that part. The hostess's smile was polite but cold. "Why don't you look around? Perhaps your date is already here." Naomi nodded, feeling her cheeks burn as she moved past the hostess stand. The restaurant was even more intimidating inside. Soft lighting, hushed conversations, waiters in formal attire moving silently between tables. She scanned the room, looking for someone who might be looking for her. That's when she saw him. A man sitting alone at a table near the window, fidgeting with his napkin. He looked about her age, maybe a bit older, with warm brown skin and closely cropped dark hair. He was wearing a suit that looked expensive, but he seemed uncomfortable in it, tugging at the collar as if it were too tight. He checked his watch, then glanced around the restaurant with an expression that mirrored exactly how Naomi felt. Like, he didn't quite belong here either. That had to be him, Tasha's finance guy. At least he seemed as nervous as she was. Gathering her courage, Naomi approached his table. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you waiting for a blind date?" The man looked up, startled. His eyes were a warm brown, with long lashes that any woman would envy. For a moment he just stared at her, and Naomi felt her confidence falter again. "I'm sorry," she began. "I thought—" "Yes," he said suddenly. "Yes, I am. You must be—" "Naomi," she supplied. "Naomi Brooks." A strange expression crossed his face, but then he smiled, standing to pull out the chair across from him. "It's nice to meet you, Naomi. I'm Elias." "Elias," she repeated, sitting down. "I don't think Tasha mentioned your last name." There was that odd look again, but it passed quickly. "Carrington," he said. "Elias Carrington. Well, Elias Carrington, I should warn you that I'm terrible at blind dates. My friend practically forced me to come." His smile widened, revealing a small dimple in his right cheek. "Would it make you feel better to know I'm not great at them either?" Just like that, the tension broke. Naomi found herself smiling back. "Actually, yes, that does help." A waiter appeared at their table, offering menus with a flourish. "May I suggest a wine to start your evening?" Elias glanced at Naomi. "What do you like?" "I'm not really a wine expert," she admitted. "Neither am I," Elias said, and there was something refreshing about his honesty. "Maybe just bring us whatever you recommend." The waiter nodded and disappeared, leaving them with the menus. Naomi opened hers and immediately felt her stomach sink at the prices. Even the salads cost more than she made in an hour at the cafe. Everything looked so— She searched for a diplomatic word. "Overpriced?" Elias suggested, with a conspiratorial smile. Naomi laughed, surprised. "I was going to say fancy, but yes, that too. Between you and me," Elias leaned forward slightly, "I'd rather be having a burger and fries somewhere. But I was told this was the place to make a good impression. By your friend who set this up." Something flickered in his eyes. "Right. My friend." The waiter returned with wine, pouring 2 glasses with expert precision before asking if they were ready to order. Naomi hadn't even had time to properly look at the menu. too distracted by Elias and his unexpected honesty. "Could we have a few more minutes?" Elias asked. "Of course, sir." The waiter glided away. "So, Naomi Brooks," Elias said, lifting his wineglass, "tell me about yourself." It was the standard first date question, but the way he asked it, with genuine curiosity in his eyes, made it feel different. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," he said simply, "but let's start with what you do." The scene at Sunshine Cafe was exactly as she'd feared. 3 reporters stood outside, cameras ready. They surged forward when they spotted Naomi and Elias approaching hand in hand. "Miss Brooks, is it true your father was involved in illegal gambling?" "Mr. Carrington, how does your family feel about your relationship?" "Naomi, did you know who Elias was when you approached him at Le Jardin?" Elias squeezed her hand and leaned down to whisper in her ear. Head high. They're nothing but noise. Together they pushed through the reporters and into the cafe. Inside, Gloria was waiting, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "These vultures have been here since we opened," she said, glaring at the reporters visible through the window. "I've told them they're not welcome inside." "Thank you, Gloria," Naomi said, relieved to see no judgment in the older woman's eyes. "Don't you worry about that trash they're printing," Gloria continued, enveloping Naomi in a hug. "Anyone who knows you knows it's all lies." Tears pricked at Naomi's eyes. "I appreciate that." Gloria turned to Elias, her expression stern. "And you? Are you going to fix this? Because our girl doesn't deserve this kind of treatment." "Yes, ma'am," Elias said solemnly. "I'm working on it. See that you do." Gloria nodded, satisfied. "Now, Naomi, you don't have to work today if you don't want to." "I want to," Naomi said firmly. "I need normal right now." "All right then, but if those reporters come in, I'm getting my broom." As Gloria returned to the kitchen, Elias guided Naomi to a quiet corner table. "I have calls to make," he said. "Lawyers, PR people, I'm going to shut this down. Can you, really? Watch me." His eyes were hard with determination. "No one attacks someone I love and gets away with it. Not even my sister." For the next hour, Elias worked his phone while Naomi served customers trying to ignore the stares and whispers. Some patrons were obviously there just to gawk, ordering the smallest possible item so they could linger and watch the drama unfold. But others, the regulars who knew her, made a point of being extra kind, leaving generous tips and words of encouragement. "Don't let them get to you, honey," said Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman who came in every morning for tea and toast. "My Harold and I were from different worlds, too. His family owned the biggest car dealership in Michigan, and I was just a secretary. They said it wouldn't last." She patted Naomi's hand. "We were married 52 years before he passed." Stories like that helped Naomi make it through the morning. By noon, the reporters outside had dwindled to just one persistent photographer, and Elias, after numerous intense phone conversations, looked grimly satisfied. "It's handled," he told Naomi during her break. "The site that published that hit piece is retracting it. They're running a full apology. Turns out their source wasn't as reliable as they thought." "What did you do?" "Let's just say I reminded them that libel lawsuits are expensive, and the Carrington family has very good lawyers." He took her hand across the table. "But that's just damage control. There's something else we need to discuss." Naomi tensed. "What?" "I've been offered a way out of this mess. A project in Europe overseeing the restoration of historic properties in several cities. It would mean leaving right away, being gone for at least 6 months. Her heart sank. "So your sister's idea? The boards?" "Though I'm sure Vivian had a hand in it." Elias squeezed her fingers. "They think getting me out of the country will let this scandal die down. They're probably right." "So you're leaving?" Naomi said flatly. "Not without you." Elias's eyes held hers. "Come with me, Naomi. We could travel together, see amazing places. You could take a break from all this media attention. Just drop everything and go to Europe." The idea was so far from her reality that Naomi almost laughed. "Elias, I have jobs here, responsibilities, patients who depend on me." "I know it's a lot to ask," he acknowledged, "but it might be the fresh start we need. Away from Vivian's interference, away from the press, just us figuring out what we want." Part of Naomi was tempted, the part that had always dreamed of seeing the world beyond Detroit, of experiencing different cultures, different lives. And the idea of doing it with Elias, of building their relationship away from the spotlight, was undeniably appealing. But another part, the practical, grounded part that had guided her through life's hardships, resisted. "I can't just leave," she said finally. "This is my home. My life is here." Disappointment flickered across Elias's face, quickly masked. "I understand it was just an idea. Is there no other option? Do you have to go? If I stay, Vivian won't stop. She'll keep digging, keep looking for ways to discredit you, to drive a wedge between us." He ran a hand through his hair. "I've never seen her this determined, this ruthless. Why does she care so much who you date? It's not about you, not really. It's about control. Ever since our father died, Vivian has been terrified of losing grip on the empire he built. In her mind, anything that diverts my attention from the company is a threat." Naomi nodded slowly, understanding dawning. "And I'm the biggest diversion yet." "You're more than a diversion," Elias corrected gently. "You're a potential new path, a different way of living, of seeing the world. That terrifies her." The cafe door opened, the bell jingling cheerfully. Naomi glanced up, then froze. Vivian Carrington stood in the entrance, impeccably dressed in a designer suit, her cold gaze sweeping the modest establishment until it landed on Elias and Naomi. "Speaking of the devil," Naomi muttered. Elias turned, his expression hardening as he spotted his sister. "Vivian, what are you doing here?" Vivian approached their table, ignoring the stares of the other customers. "We need to talk, privately. Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of Naomi." Vivian's smile was tight. "Fine. The board has unanimously approved your European project. The jet is fueled and ready. You leave tonight." "Tonight?" Elias looked genuinely startled. "That wasn't the timeline we discussed." "The timeline has accelerated." Vivian glanced at Naomi, then back at her brother. "Given recent developments, the board feels it's best to move quickly." "Recent developments meaning the hit piece you planted about Naomi?" Elias's voice was dangerously quiet. Vivian didn't flinch. "I don't know what you're talking about, but I do know that your dalliance is becoming a liability for the company. Stock prices dropped 3 points this morning." "I don't care about stock prices." "Well, you should. Thousands of employees depend on the company's stability. Your personal drama is threatening that stability." Naomi watched the siblings' face, off seeing the family resemblance in their stubborn expressions, even as their values clearly diverged. This was Elias's world, board meetings and stock prices and private jets waiting on command, a world she could never truly belong in. "Excuse me," she said, standing abruptly. "I need to get back to work." Elias caught her hand. "Naomi, wait." "It's fine," she said, not meeting his eyes. "You two clearly have things to discuss." She walked away, her heart heavy. Behind her, she could hear Elias and Vivian's voices rising, their argument intensifying. This was the reality of loving. Elias Carrington, constant battles, constant scrutiny, constant reminders of the gulf between their worlds. As she mechanically wiped down the counter, Naomi wondered if love really was enough to bridge that gulf, or if perhaps some differences were simply too vast to overcome. Hours later, Naomi sat in Mrs. Peterson's room at Evergreen, reading aloud from one of the elderly woman's favorite books. She'd come straight from the cafe, needing the comfort of routine, the simple satisfaction of being useful to someone who appreciated her. Mrs. Peterson listened attentively, but when Naomi finished the chapter, she reached out to pat her hand. "Your heart's not in it today, dear," she observed. "What's troubling you?" Naomi hesitated, then sighed. "I'm in love with someone I probably shouldn't be." "Ah," Mrs. Peterson nodded sagely. "The young man you mentioned. I saw your picture in the paper this morning. Quite handsome." Naomi winced. "You saw that?" "Hard to miss. The nurses were all talking about it. Naomi Brooks dating a Carrington." Mrs. Peterson's eyes twinkled. "Quite the scandal." Despite everything, Naomi had to smile. "It certainly is." "And is he in love with you too?" "He says he is. But you have doubts." Naomi considered the question carefully. "Not about his feelings. About whether love is enough. We come from such different worlds." "Different worlds," Mrs. Peterson repeated thoughtfully. You know, my Henry came from money. Not Carrington money, mind you, but comfortable. His father owned factories. My father was a janitor at one of those factories. I didn't know that. Oh, yes. Henry's parents were horrified when he brought me home. Thought he could do much better than a janitor's daughter. She chuckled at the memory. His mother actually fainted. What did you do? I picked myself up and walked out, told Henry I wouldn't be where I wasn't wanted. Mrs. Peterson's eyes grew distant with memory. He followed me. Said if his family couldn't accept the woman he loved, then he didn't need his family. That's romantic, Naomi said, but also terribly hard. Love is hard, dear. Always has been. The question isn't whether it's hard, but whether it's worth it. And Mrs. Peterson squeezed Naomi's hand with surprising strength. Is he worth it, this young man of yours? Before Naomi could answer, there was a soft knock at the door. She turned to see Elias standing in the doorway, his expression solemn. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said. The nurse at the desk said I might find you here. Elias, Naomi said, rising. This is Mrs. Peterson. Mrs. Peterson, this is Elias Carrington. The young man from the papers, Mrs. Peterson said, her eyes bright with interest. Come in, let me look at you properly. Elias entered the room, extending his hand politely to Mrs. Peterson. It's a pleasure to meet you, ma'am. Naomi has told me a lot about you. Has she now? All good things, I hope. The best, Elias assured her, his smile warm and genuine. Mrs. Peterson studied him with the frank assessment of the elderly. You'll do, she declared finally. You look at her the right way. The right way? Elias asked. Like she's the sun and moon and stars all wrapped up in one. Mrs. Peterson nodded decisively. My Henry looked at me that way for 62 years. A faint blush colored Elias's cheeks. I can see why Naomi is so fond of you, Mrs. Peterson. You're very perceptive. Comes with age, young man. She waved a hand toward the door. Now go on, you two. I'm sure you have important things to discuss, and my program is about to start. Naomi leaned down to kiss the elderly woman's cheek. I'll see you tomorrow. Mrs. Peterson. We'll see, the woman replied cryptically, already reaching for the television remote. In the hallway, Naomi turned to Elias. What happened with Vivian? We reached an understanding, he said. Or rather, I made her understand some things. Such as the fact that I'm a grown man capable of making my own decisions, that I won't be manipulated or threatened, and that if she ever attacks you again, I'll walk away from the company entirely. Naomi's eyes widened. Elias, you can't do that. The company is your heritage, your responsibility. Some responsibilities are more important than others. He took her hands in his. Naomi, I'm not going to Europe. Not without you, and not on Vivian's terms. Relief flooded through her, quickly followed by concern. What about the board, the stock prices? The board will adapt. The stocks will recover. He smiled wryly. Turns out I have more leverage than Vivian thought. My mother's will included some provisions that give me significant control over certain aspects of the company. Aspects Vivian can't touch without my consent. You never mentioned that before. I never needed to use it before. His thumbs traced circles on her palms. But that's not what I came to tell you. I've made a decision about my mother's house. Oh? I'm turning it into a community center, just like we discussed. Art classes, job training, resources for the neighborhood. I've already filed the paperwork to create a non-profit foundation to run it. Naomi felt a surge of pride. That's wonderful, Elias. Your mother would be so proud. There's more, he continued. The foundation needs a director, someone with compassion, intelligence, and a genuine understanding of what communities need. Someone like you. Naomi blinked in surprise. Me? Elias, I don't have any experience running a foundation. You have experience caring for people, understanding their needs. That's more important than knowing how to file 501c3 paperwork. He squeezed her hands. We can hire people for the technical stuff. What we need, what I need, is a heart. Someone who sees the potential in people the way you do. The offer was unexpected but strangely perfect. A way to use her caregiving skills on a broader scale to make a real difference in her city. And a way to build a bridge between her world and Elias's, not by her entering his realm of board meetings and stock prices, but by him investing in hers. "I'd need to think about it," she said carefully. "It's a big change. Of course, take all the time you need." His eyes held hers. "I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere, Naomi." The simple promise warmed her heart. For the first time since the media storm began, Naomi felt truly hopeful about their future. Maybe they could find a path forward together, one that honored both their worlds instead of forcing either to abandon theirs. "What about New York?" she asked. "Your life there?" "New York will always be there, but for now my place is here." He smiled softly. "With you, if you'll have me." Naomi thought of Mrs. Peterson's question. Is he worth it? Looking at Elias now, the man who had stood up to his family for her, who was using his resources to help her community, who looked at her like she was the sun and moon and stars, she knew the answer. "I'll have you," she said, stepping into his embrace. Complications and all, his arms tightened around her, his face buried in her hair. "I love you, Naomi Brooks." "I love you too, Elias Carrington." In that moment, in the quiet hallway of Evergreen Assisted Living, the gulf between their worlds didn't seem so vast after all. 6 months later, Naomi stood in the newly renovated community room of what was now officially the Eleanor Carrington Community Center. The grand opening was tomorrow, and everything was finally ready. The art studio with its large windows allowing natural light to flood the space, the computer lab equipped with the latest technology, the library filled with books for all ages. As director, Naomi had thrown herself into every aspect of the project, from program development to staff hiring. The work was challenging but deeply fulfilling, allowing her to help people on a scale she'd never imagined possible. She still visited Mrs. Peterson 3 times a week, though she'd had to give up her job at Sunshine Cafe. Gloria had understood completely, proudly telling everyone that her former employee was now running that fancy new center on Elmwood. The media attention had eventually died down, as Elias had predicted. There had been a brief resurgence when Vivian announced her engagement to a European aristocrat, the gossip columns speculating that the Carrington siblings were competing for headlines. But Naomi and Elias had ignored it, focusing instead on building their life together. Elias split his time between Detroit and New York, handling his company responsibilities remotely when possible, but traveling when necessary. The arrangement wasn't perfect. Naomi missed him terribly when he was gone, but they made it work, treasuring their time together all the more for its occasional scarcity. "Admiring your handiwork?" Elias's voice came from behind her, his arms slipping around her waist. Naomi leaned back against him, smiling. "Just making sure everything's perfect for tomorrow." "It is perfect because of you." He kissed the top of her head. "My mother would have loved what you've done with this place." "I wish I could have met her. She would have adored you. Almost." "As much as I do." Naomi turned in his arms, studying his face. Something was different today, a tension around his eyes, a nervous energy she couldn't quite place. "What's going on? You seem jittery." "Do I?" Elias attempted innocence and failed completely. "I might have something on my mind." "Care to share?" He took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about the future. Our future." Naomi's heart quickened. "Oh, these past 6 months have been the happiest of my life, even with the challenges, the distance, the adjustments." He took her hands in his. "I know we come from different worlds, Naomi. I know we've had to work to find our common ground. But that work has been the most worthwhile thing I've ever done. For me, too," she said softly. "The thing is," he hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain, "I don't want to live in 2 places anymore. I don't want to split my time. I want to wake up with you every morning and fall asleep with you every night." "What are you saying, Elias?" "I'm saying I've restructured my role at Carrington. I'll be primarily based here in Detroit now, overseeing our Midwest properties. Vivian will handle the East Coast operations." Naomi's eyes widened. "You're moving to Detroit? Permanently? What about the New York office?" "I'll still go back for quarterly board meetings. But my home will be here." He squeezed her hands. "With you, if that's what you want." Joy bubbled up inside her. Of course it's what I want. But Elias, are you sure? That's a huge change. I've never been more sure of anything. His eyes held hers, filled with love and certainty. So you've taught me what matters, Naomi, not money or status or what other people think. What matters is being true to yourself and the people you love. Naomi felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. I love you, she whispered. I love you, too. Elias reached into his pocket. Which is why I have a question to ask you. Her breath caught as he pulled out a small velvet box. Elias? He opened the box, revealing not a ring, but a delicate gold locket on a chain. This is for you, he said, but it comes with a question. Naomi stared at the locket, recognition dawning. Is that your grandmother's? Elias confirmed. You told me about it once, how it had been stolen when her house was broken into after she died, how it was the one thing you wished you could have kept. How did you find it? Her voice was barely audible, choked with emotion. It wasn't easy, but I have resources. He lifted the locket from the box. May I? Naomi nodded, turning so he could fasten it around her neck. The familiar weight of it against her skin brought back a flood of memories. Her grandmother wearing it every day, letting a young Naomi play with it while telling stories of the past. It's the most precious gift anyone has ever given me, she said, turning back to face him. There's more, Elias said. Open it. With trembling fingers, Naomi clicked open the locket. Inside, where once had been photos of her grandparents as a young couple, was a tiny slip of paper. Written on it in Elias's neat handwriting were the words, Will you marry me? She looked up to find Elias on one knee before her, a ring box now open in his hand. The ring inside was simple but elegant, a single diamond in a vintage setting. Naomi Brooks, he said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? 1,000 thoughts raced through Naomi's mind, the differences in their backgrounds, the challenges they'd already faced, the ones that might still lie ahead. But overriding all of those thoughts was the certainty that this man, this relationship, was worth whatever difficulties might come. Yes, she said, her voice clear and sure. Yes, Elias Carrington, I will marry you. His face lit up with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Standing, he pulled her into his arms, his kiss a promise of all the years to come. In that moment, the gulf between their worlds wasn't just bridged, it vanished entirely. There was only Naomi and Elias, and the love they'd found at the wrong table that had turned out to be exactly right. 1 year later, Naomi wiped down the counter at Sunshine Cafe, exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. She wasn't supposed to be working here anymore. Her job as director of the Eleanor Carrington Community Center was more than full-time. But Gloria had called in a panic this morning, short-staffed with the summer flu going around, and Naomi couldn't say no to the woman who'd been like a second mother to her. So here she was, pulling a double shift on what should have been her day off, her wedding ring catching the light as she moved. She and Elias had married 6 months ago. A small ceremony in the garden of his mother's house, now her office at the community center. Mrs. Peterson had been there in her wheelchair, beaming with approval. Even Vivian had attended, her aristocratic fiancé in tow, her congratulations stiff but seemingly sincere. Married life had its challenges. Elias still traveled to New York monthly for business, though he kept his promises to make Detroit his primary home. They'd bought a historic house not far from the community center, modest by Carrington standards, but the most beautiful home Naomi had ever lived in. They were talking about starting a family soon, a thought that both thrilled and terrified. Herr Kanauta, the bell above the door jingled and Naomi looked up, her professional smile ready. It froze on her face when she saw who had entered. Elias stood in the doorway, looking particularly handsome in casual clothes, his hair slightly tousled by the summer breeze. But it was his expression that caught her attention, a mixture of nervousness and determination that reminded her of the night they'd first met. Elias, she said, surprised, I thought you were in New York until tomorrow. I came back early. He approached the counter, an odd formality in his movements. I needed to see you. Something in his tone made Naomi's heart stutter. Is everything okay? Not exactly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, placing it on the counter between them. I found this. I thought you should have it. Naomi stared at the box, confusion and a vague sense of déjà vu washing over her. With hesitant fingers, she opened it to find a familiar gold locket, her grandmother's locket, the one Elias had miraculously recovered and used to propose to her a year ago. I don't understand, she said, looking up at him. I already have this. You gave it to me when you proposed. Look inside, Elias said quietly. Naomi opened the locket. Inside was not the proposal note from a year ago, but a much older photo, her grandparents as a young couple, the original contents of the locket that had been lost when it was stolen. How did you... she began, her voice catching. It took time, Elias said. A lot of detective work, but I found the original photos in your grandmother's church records, had them restored and sized to fit. Tears filled Naomi's eyes as she stared at the tiny, precious images, her grandmother's young, smiling face, her grandfather in his army uniform. Memories she thought were lost forever. Elias, she whispered, I don't know what to say. He took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. I know I don't deserve a seat at your table, but I'd give everything I have to try again. The word struck her as odd. They were already married, already building a life together. Try again, what do you mean? I mean that I love you, Naomi Brooks Carrington, more today than yesterday, and less than I will tomorrow. His eyes held hers, sincere and vulnerable. I want every day with you to be a new beginning, a fresh chance to be worthy of your love. Understanding dawned. This wasn't about a rift between them or a problem to be solved. This was Elias, romantic to his core, recreating the moment they'd first connected, reminding her of the foundation of their love. Emotion welled up in Naomi's throat as she looked at this man, her husband, her partner, the person who had crossed worlds to be with her. She thought of all they'd overcome, all they'd built together, all the promise that still lay ahead. Their eyes locked across the counter, hers shining with tears, his warm with love and hope. Everything that needed to be said passed between them in that silent exchange. Gratitude, commitment, and the deep, abiding love that had begun at the wrong table, but had led them exactly where they were meant to be. Naomi's lips didn't speak. They didn't need to. Her eyes said everything. I work 2 jobs, Naomi said, deciding honesty was the best approach. If he was going to judge her for it, better to know now. I'm a barista at Sunshine Cafe in the mornings, and I work as a caregiver at Evergreen Assisted Living 3 evenings a week. Instead of the polite disinterest she'd come to expect from men when she talked about her jobs, Elias looked genuinely impressed. That sounds demanding. What made you choose those fields? No one had ever asked her that before. I like helping people, she said. The cafe is all about making someone's morning a little brighter. And at Evergreen, well, those residents have lived full lives. They deserve dignity and kindness in their final years. Elias nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. That's really admirable. Naomi felt a blush rising in her cheeks and quickly changed the subject. What about you? Tasha mentioned something about finance. Again, that brief hesitation. Yes, I'm in real estate finance, investment properties, that sort of thing. Sounds complicated. It can be, but not as challenging as handling difficult customers or caring for people with dementia, I'm sure. There was something different about the way he spoke. Not condescending, but genuinely respectful. Most men Naomi dated either pitied her for her jobs or saw them as something temporary until she found a real career. How did you end up in Detroit? She asked. You don't sound like you're from here. I'm not. I grew up mainly on the East Coast. I'm only in town for a few weeks to, he paused, handle some family business. Family from Detroit. My mother was, he said, and something in his tone made Naomi think this might be a sensitive subject. The waiter returned, and they quickly ordered, Elias choosing the steak, Naomi opting for the least expensive pasta dish on the menu. As the waiter left, Elias leaned forward again. Want to hear a confession? Naomi raised her eyebrows. On a first date? That sounds dangerous. He laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine. Not that kind of confession. I was just going to say that I was seriously considering not showing up tonight. Really? Why? Blind dates are usually so... He searched for the word. Awkward? Forced? Disappointing, Naomi supplied. All of the above. You sit across from a stranger trying to make small talk while secretly wondering if they're judging everything about you. And are you? Judging me? The question slipped out before she could. Stop it. Elias looked directly into her eyes. Only in the best ways. I'm judging that you're hard-working, compassionate, and refreshingly honest. Something fluttered in Naomi's chest. That's a pretty good judgment. Am I wrong? No, she admitted. Those are things I value. What about you? What do you value? Elias Carrington? He seemed to consider the question seriously. Authenticity, he said finally. People who are genuine, who don't pretend to be something they're not. There was an intensity to his words that made Naomi wonder if there was a story behind them. Before she could ask, their food arrived, the plates arranged with artistic precision. This looks amazing, Naomi said, genuinely impressed by the presentation. It does, Elias agreed, but I still maintain that sometimes a good burger beats fancy cuisine. Now that we can agree on, Naomi laughed. There's this little place near my apartment called Fat Joe's that makes the best burgers in Detroit. Better than Miller's downtown. Way better. Miller's is for tourists. Elias grinned. I'll have to try Fat Joe's then. Maybe you could show me sometime. Was he already asking for a second date? Naomi felt a flutter of excitement. I could be persuaded, she said, trying to sound casual. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing easily. Elias asked about her childhood in Detroit, and Naomi found herself sharing stories she rarely told on first dates. About her grandmother, who'd raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was 10. About her dreams of becoming a nurse before financial reality set in. About her love of classic movies and rainy Sundays. In turn, Elias told her about growing up with a sister who was always competing with him, about his love of architecture and history, about his mother, who had encouraged his interests even when his father hadn't. He was careful with details, Naomi noticed, never mentioning specific places or names, but there was an honesty to the way he described his feelings that made her trust him. Time seemed to disappear. The restaurant had begun to empty around them, but neither noticed until the waiter approached with a discreet cough. I apologize, but we will be closing in 15 minutes. Naomi checked her watch in surprise. It's almost 11. We've been here for 4 hours. Elias looked equally startled. I had no idea time flies when... You're having a good time? Naomi finished for him. Exactly. His smile was soft, almost intimate. The waiter placed the check on the table, and Elias reached for it immediately. Please let me. Naomi knew she should offer to split it, but the truth was the bill would probably equal half her rent. Thank you, she said instead. Outside the restaurant, the night air was cool and clear. The downtown lights sparkled against the dark sky, and for a moment they stood in silence, neither wanting the evening to end. Can I walk you home? Elias asked. I'm taking the bus, Naomi said. My apartment's on the east side. Then I'll wait with you at the bus stop. They walked slowly, shoulders occasionally brushing. Naomi couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this comfortable with someone she'd just met. There was something about Elias that put her at ease. Maybe his own apparent discomfort with the fancy restaurant, or the way he listened to her, as if what she had to say really mattered. So, she said as they approached the bus stop, that wasn't nearly as terrible as I expected a blind date to be. Elias laughed. High praise indeed. You know what I mean. It was nice, really nice. It was, he agreed, his voice softening. Naomi, I'd like to see you again, if you want to, that is. The bus was approaching, its headlights cutting through the darkness. I'd like that, she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Tomorrow, or is that too soon? Naomi hesitated. I have the morning shift at the cafe, then I'm at Evergreen until 8. 8:30 then? I could meet you at Evergreen. The bus pulled up to the curb, doors opening with a hydraulic hiss. Okay, Naomi agreed. 8:30. She boarded the bus, turning to wave at Elias through the window as it pulled away. He stood on the sidewalk, waving back until the bus turned a corner, and he disappeared from view. Sitting back in her seat, Naomi felt a smile spreading across her face. For the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. Maybe Tasha was right. Maybe this one was different. What Naomi didn't see was the man who approached Elias after the bus left, a well-dressed man in his 30s who had been sitting at the bar in Le Jardin all evening. "Mr. Carrington," the man said, "your sister has been trying to reach you. She's concerned about your absence from the board meeting this afternoon." Elias's smile faded. "Tell Vivian I'll call her in the morning, Robert. She was quite insistent, sir. The company lawyers need your signature on several documents regarding your mother's estate." "In the morning," Elias repeated firmly. "Very well, sir." Robert hesitated. "If I may ask, who was the young lady? Ms. Rothschild has been inquiring about your social engagements while in Detroit." Elias's jaw tightened. "That's none of Vivian's business. And it's certainly none of yours." "Of course, sir. The car is waiting whenever you're ready." As Robert walked away, Elias looked in the direction the bus had gone, a troubled expression crossing his face. What had started as a simple misunderstanding, letting Naomi believe he was her blind date, now felt like something much more complicated. She had no idea who he really was, what his life was actually like, and he had no idea how she would react when she found out. But for the first time in years, Elias had spent an evening being seen for himself, not for his name or his money. He'd felt real in a way he rarely did in his own world, and he wasn't ready to let that feeling go. Meanwhile, across town in a trendy downtown bar, Tasha checked her phone for the 20th time, frowning at the empty screen. "Everything okay?" asked the bartender. "My friend was supposed to meet a blind date hours ago," Tasha said. "I haven't heard from her, and the guy just texted me saying she never showed up." Maybe she changed her mind. No way. She promised she'd go. Tasha sent another text. "Naomi, where are you? Kevin said you didn't show up at Le Jardin. Call me ASAP." Her finger hovered over the send button for a moment before she hit it. Whatever had happened with Naomi, Tasha had a feeling this night wasn't going according to plan. She had no idea just how right she was. Morning light streamed through the thin curtains of Naomi's apartment as she got ready for her shift at Sunshine. "Cafe." She hummed softly to herself, a smile playing on her lips as she remembered the night before. Her phone buzzed with a series of texts from Tasha. "Where were you last night? Kevin waited for an hour." "Are you okay? Call me." "Seriously, Naomi, I'm worried." Naomi frowned, confusion replacing her good mood. Who was Kevin? Then realization hit her like a bucket of cold water. If Kevin was her blind date, then who was Elias? She quickly dialed Tasha's number. "Finally," Tasha answered on the first ring. "What happened last night? Kevin said you never showed up at Le Jardin." "I was at Le Jardin," Naomi said slowly. "I met a man named Elias Carrington. I thought he was my date." "Elias who?" "Your date was Kevin Thompson, the accountant from my gym." "Tall glasses, red hair, you stood him up." Naomi sank onto the edge of her bed. "But Elias, he said he was waiting for a blind date." "Well, it wasn't you," Tasha said. "What did you do, just sit down with some random guy?" "He wasn't random," Naomi defended. "He was alone, looking nervous. It made sense." "So you spent the whole evening with a stranger who pretended to be your blind date?" "Naomi, that's not safe." "It wasn't like that," Naomi insisted, though doubt began to creep in. "We talked for hours. He was real, genuine." "Or a really good liar," Tasha countered. "Did you Google him? Elias Carrington." "The name sounds familiar." "I have to get to work," Naomi said, glancing at the clock. "I'll call you later." She hung up, her mind racing. Why hadn't Elias corrected her? Had the whole evening been based on a lie? She grabbed her phone again and typed his name into the search bar. The results loaded and Naomi's jaw dropped. Elias Carrington wasn't just some finance guy. He was the heir to Carrington Luxury Properties, a billion-dollar real estate empire with holdings across the country. There were photos of him at charity galas and business events, always looking polished and slightly uncomfortable in expensive suits. There were articles about his late mother, Eleanor Carrington, a Detroit native who had married into the Carrington fortune and recently passed away. And there was his sister, Vivian Carrington, sleek and sophisticated, described as the driving Force behind the company's aggressive expansion. Naomi stared at her phone, trying to reconcile the man from these glossy photos with the person she'd spent hours talking to last night. The man who'd said he valued authenticity, who'd listened to her stories about working at a cafe and caring for the elderly as if they were fascinating. The man who'd lied to her from the moment they met. She shoved her phone into her bag and headed out, her good mood thoroughly ruined. By the time she reached Sunshine Cafe, Naomi had convinced herself that it was better to find out now rather than later. Better to know that Elias Carrington was just another disappointment before she got too invested. "You look like you're planning a murder," Gloria commented, as Naomi aggressively wiped down the counter. "Bad date last night." "You could say that," Naomi muttered. "Want to talk about it?" Naomi sighed. "Not really, just another guy who wasn't what he seemed." Gloria patted her hand sympathetically. "Their loss, honey." The morning rush kept Naomi busy enough to push thoughts of Elias aside. She took orders, made drinks, and smiled at customers on autopilot. It wasn't until the cafe quieted down around 11 that she allowed herself to check her phone. 3 missed calls from Tasha and a text message from an unknown number. "Good morning, Naomi. It's Elias. I got your number from the restaurant. Hope that's okay. Looking forward to seeing you tonight. I'll be at Evergreen at 8:30 as planned." Naomi stared at the message, her emotions a tangled mess. Part of her wanted to cancel, to protect herself from whatever game he was playing. But another part, the part that had felt so alive last night, wanted to see him again. To demand an explanation face to face, she didn't reply. The rest of her shift passed slowly. By the time Naomi left the cafe at 3, she had decided to confront Elias when he showed up at Evergreen. She would be calm, dignified, and direct. She would ask him why he'd lied, listen to his explanation, and then walk away with her head held high. At Evergreen, Mrs. Peterson was having a good day. She recognized Naomi by name and was eager to show her the new knitting project she'd started. "It's a blanket for my granddaughter," she explained, her gnarled fingers working the needles with surprising dexterity. "She's expecting a baby in the spring." Naomi knew that Mrs. Peterson's granddaughter, now in her 50s, hadn't spoken to her grandmother in years, but she nodded encouragingly. "It's beautiful. She'll love it." "Do you have children, Naomi?" Mrs. Peterson asked, momentarily lucid. "No, Mrs. Peterson, I'm not married. But there's someone special." The elderly woman's eyes were shrewd. "You have that look." "What look?" "Like you've met someone who makes your heart beat faster." "I remember that feeling." Mrs. Peterson smiled wistfully. "My Henry could make my knees weak with just a smile. 62 years we were married, and I never got tired of looking at his face." Naomi thought of Elias's warm brown eyes, the way they'd crinkled at the corners when he laughed. "I thought there might be someone," she admitted. "But it turns out, he wasn't honest with me." "Men rarely are, dear," Mrs. Peterson said matter-of-factly. "The question is whether his dishonesty comes from a place of malice or fear. Does it matter? Of course it does. We're all afraid of something. Sometimes we lie to protect ourselves." Mrs. Peterson's hands stilled on her knitting. "Henry lied to me when we first met, told me he was a college graduate when he'd never finished high school. He was ashamed, you see. Thought I wouldn't look twice at him if I knew the truth, Ma. What did you do when you found out?" "I married him anyway." Mrs. Peterson chuckled. "After I made him promise never to lie to me again, and as far as I know he never did." Naomi considered this as she helped Mrs. Peterson with her dinner and got her settled for the evening. By the time 8 o'clock rolled around, she was no closer to deciding what to do about Elias. She signed out at the front desk and stepped into the warm summer evening. And there he was, leaning against a sleek black car in the parking lot, looking up at the stars. He was dressed more casually tonight, dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt that somehow looked expensive despite its simplicity. When he spotted her, his face lit up with a smile that made her heart do that inconvenient little flip. "Naomi," he said, straightening up, "I was starting to think you might not come out." "I work here," she pointed out coolly. "I didn't have much choice." His smile faltered. "Is everything okay?" Naomi crossed her arms. "Who are you, Elias? Really?" He hesitated, and she saw the moment he realized she knew. You looked me up. My friend called to ask why I stood up my actual blind date. A man named Kevin, who I've never met because I was too busy talking to you. Elias ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. I can explain. I'm listening. Naomi kept her voice steady, despite the disappointment building in her chest. When you approached my table, I was waiting for my lawyer. Business dinner, not a date. You looked so hopeful. And when you mistook me for your date, I went with it. He took a step toward her. I know it was wrong. I should have corrected you immediately. But then we started talking, and it felt so good to just be a person having dinner with another person. Not Elias Carrington, heir to the Carrington fortune, but just me. So you lied because it was convenient for you, Naomi said flatly. No. I mean, yes, at first, but then... He looked at her pleadingly. Naomi, last night was the most honest conversation I've had with anyone in years. Everything else I told you was true. Except for the small detail of who you actually are. I'm still the same person you talked to last night. The person who listens to history podcasts and loves old buildings and thinks you're the most refreshingly real woman he's ever met. Despite herself, Naomi felt her resolve weakening. There was an earnestness in his eyes that was hard to dismiss. What about the part where you're apparently a billionaire? You let me worry about the prices on that menu, Elias. I'm not actually a billionaire, he said quickly. The company is worth billions. There's a difference. Naomi couldn't help the small laugh that escaped her. Oh, well, that makes it all better then. His shoulders relaxed slightly at her sarcasm. Give me a chance to make it up to you, please. One more evening, and if you still think I'm just another lying disappointment, I'll drive away and never bother you again. She should say no. Every ounce of self-preservation Naomi possessed was screaming at her to walk away. But there was Mrs. Peterson's voice in her head, asking if his dishonesty came from malice or fear. Where would we go? She asked finally. Relief washed over his face. Fat Joe's Burgers. You said it was the best in Detroit, and I want to see if you're right. The fact that he remembered that small detail from their conversation made something warm unfurl in Naomi's chest. Fine, one more chance, but I'm paying for my own burger. Deal, he said solemnly. But his eyes were dancing. Elias opened the passenger door of his car, a luxury model that probably cost more than Naomi made in a year, and she slid in, trying not to be impressed by the butter-soft leather seats. Fat Joe's was a hole-in-the-wall place in Naomi's neighborhood, with fluorescent lighting and plastic booths that had seen better days. But the burgers were indeed the best in Detroit, huge, juicy, and perfectly seasoned. Elias looked around with genuine interest as they entered. I love places like this, the ones that have been around forever because they do one thing really. Well, it was my grandmother's favorite, Naomi said, leading him to a booth in the corner. She used to bring me here every Sunday after church. They ordered double cheeseburgers, fries, and chocolate milkshakes, and settled into a slightly awkward silence. So, Naomi said finally, tell me about the real Elias Carrington. He seemed to consider the question carefully. The real Elias is complicated. On paper, I'm the co-CEO of Carrington Luxury Properties, a company my grandfather started and my father expanded. In reality, my sister Vivian handles most of the day-to-day operations. By choice, partly. Vivian lives for the business, always has. I'm more interested in the properties themselves, the architecture, the history, the stories behind them, than in the business of buying and selling them. He shrugged. My father always said I lacked ambition. And what do you think? I think I'm interested in different things. I studied architectural history in college, wanted to work in historic preservation, but when my father died 5 years ago, the expectation was that Vivian and I would take over together. Their food arrived, and Naomi watched with satisfaction. As Elias took his first bite of the burger, his eyes widening in appreciation. Okay, you were right, he admitted after swallowing. Best burger in Detroit. Told you, she said, allowing herself a small smile. Your turn, Elias said, wiping his mouth. Tell me something about the real Naomi Brooks that you didn't share last night. Naomi considered this as she ate a fry. I love to sing, she said. Finally. Not professionally or anything, but my grandmother was in the church choir and she taught me all the old spirituals. Sometimes I still sing them when I'm alone. Would you sing for me sometime? Elias asked softly. Maybe, if you earn it. She gave him a pointed look, and he had the grace to look abashed. Fair enough. As they ate, the tension between them gradually eased. Elias told her more about his mother, who had grown up in Detroit, and never lost her love for the city, despite spending most of her adult life in New York and Europe. That's why I'm here, he explained. She left properties here in her will, including her childhood home. I'm supposed to be deciding which ones to keep and which to sell. And what have you decided? I'm still figuring that out. My sister wants to sell everything. She sees Detroit as a developing market for luxury condos. He made air quotes around the phrase, his distaste evident. And you don't agree? I think my mother kept these properties for a reason. She loved this city, its history, its resilience. I want to honor that somehow. He looked at her curiously. What would you do if you suddenly inherited valuable property in a city that was struggling but starting to come back? Naomi thought about it seriously. I'd try to find a balance, maybe sell some to fund improvements on others. Make sure whatever development happened benefited the people who already live here. Not just wealthy outsiders looking for investment opportunities. Elias nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. That's actually really smart. Don't sound so surprised, she teased. I'm not. Just impressed. His eyes held hers across the table. You see things clearly, Naomi. It's one of the things I like most about you. The simple sincerity in his voice made her blush. You hardly know me. I'd like to change that. He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. If you'll let me. Naomi looked at his outstretched hand, then back at his face. There was vulnerability there, a kind of hopeful uncertainty that couldn't be faked. Slowly she placed her hand in his. I'm still mad at you for lying, she warned. I know. I'll make it up to you. They finished their meal, talking about safer topics, favorite movies, books they'd read recently, places they'd like to visit someday. By the time they left Fat Joe's, the awkwardness had dissolved completely, replaced by the same easy connection they'd felt the night before. Outside, the summer night was warm and clear. Can I walk you home? Elias asked. It's only a few blocks, Naomi said. But yes, I'd like that. They walked side by side, occasionally brushing shoulders. The neighborhood was quiet, most windows dark or flickering with the blue light of televisions. So, this is where you grew up? Elias asked, looking around with interest. 2 streets over, Naomi pointed. My grandmother's house. I lived there until she passed away 3 years ago. I'm sorry. She was 92 and went peacefully in her sleep. That's all any of us can hope for, really. Is the house still in your family? Naomi shook her head. Had to sell it to pay for her medical bills and funeral. The new owners gutted it, turned it into one of those modern, open-concept things. She tried to keep the bitterness out of her voice. My grandmother would have hated it. Elias was quiet for a moment. That must have been hard. Life is hard, Naomi said simply. You do what you have to do. They reached her apartment building, a modest 3-story brick structure that had seen better days. Naomi paused at the entrance, suddenly self-conscious about the peeling paint and the broken step that the landlord had been promising to fix for months. But Elias wasn't looking at the building. He was looking at her, his expression soft in the glow of the street lamp. Thank you for giving me a second chance, he said quietly. Don't make me regret it, she replied, but there was no bite in her words. I won't. He hesitated, then slowly leaned forward, giving her plenty of time to step back if she wanted to. Naomi didn't move. His lips met hers in a gentle kiss that sent warmth spreading through her body. It was brief, almost chaste, but it left her breathless. Good night, Naomi. Brooks, Elias whispered as he pulled away. Good night, Elias Carrington, she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. She watched him walk back toward his car, a smile playing on her lips despite her lingering reservations. Whatever this was between them, it felt different, special. Worth exploring despite the complications. Little did she know that complications were already heading her way. The next morning, Naomi was serving a customer at Sunshine Cafe when the bell above the door jingled. She looked up to see Elias walking in, dressed casually in jeans and a t-shirt that somehow still managed to look expensive. "Good morning," he said, approaching the counter with a smile that made her heart do that inconvenient flip again. "This is a surprise," Naomi said, aware of Gloria watching them with undisguised interest from the pastry case. "What brings you to Sunshine Cafe?" "I was in the neighborhood," he said, which they both knew was unlikely. "Thought I'd see where you work." "Well, this is it." Naomi gestured around the small cafe with its mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. "Not exactly Le Jardin." "I like it better," Elias said, his eyes never leaving her face. "It has character, like the woman who works here." Naomi felt her cheeks heat up. "Flattery will get you nowhere, but coffee might. What can I get you?" "Whatever you recommend." She made him a cappuccino, adding a small heart to the foam without really thinking about it. When she handed it to him, his smile widened at the sight of the heart. "Perfect," he said softly. Gloria sidled up beside Naomi, extending her hand to Elias. "I'm Gloria, the owner. And you are?" "Elias," he replied, shaking her hand. "A friend of Naomi's." "A friend," Gloria repeated skeptically, looking between them. "Well, any friend of Naomi's is welcome here. First coffee's on the house." "That's very kind, but I insist on paying," Elias said, pulling out his wallet. Gloria waved him away. "Nonsense, you can pay next time." "There'll be a next time?" he asked, looking at Naomi. "If you're lucky," she replied, trying to sound casual, despite the warmth spreading through her chest. Elias took a seat at a small table near the window, sipping his coffee and occasionally glancing up to catch Naomi's eye as she worked. The morning rush kept her busy, but she was acutely aware of his presence, like a warm spot in the room that she kept orbiting back to. When there was finally a lull, she poured herself a coffee and joined him at his table. "So," she said, "you just happened to be in the neighborhood at 7 in the morning. I wanted to see you," he admitted. "Is that okay?" The simple honesty of his answer disarmed her. "Yes," she said softly. "It's okay." They talked for a few minutes about their plans for the day. Elias had meetings with lawyers about his mother's estate. Naomi had errands to run before her shift at Evergreen. "Can I see you tomorrow?" he asked as he prepared to leave. "I know a place I'd like to show you." "What kind of place?" "It's a surprise, but I think you'll like it." His eyes were hopeful. "Do you trust me?" A week ago, Naomi would have said no without hesitation. Trust was something she gave cautiously after it had been earned, but there was something about Elias that made her want to take a leap of faith. "I'm starting to," she admitted. His smile was like sunrise. "I'll pick you up at 10. If you're free?" "I'm free." As Elias left the cafe, Naomi felt a lightness in her chest that had been absent for a long time. Whatever was happening between them felt real, despite the unusual beginning. "He's handsome," Gloria commented, coming to clear his cup. "He is," Naomi agreed. "And he looks at you like you hung the moon," Naomi laughed. "We barely know each other." "Sometimes that's all it takes," Gloria said wisely. "My Harold proposed after 2 weeks. We were married 53 years. "It's not like that," Naomi protested. "We're just getting to know each other." "Mm-hmm," Gloria hummed skeptically. "Well, I like him. He has kind eyes." Naomi thought about Elias's eyes, warm, expressive, honest, despite his initial deception. "Yes," she agreed softly. "He does." The rest of the day passed in a pleasant haze. Naomi found herself checking her phone more often than usual, smiling each time she saw a text from Elias. They were simple messages, asking how her day was going, sending a photo of an interesting building he'd passed, telling her he was looking forward to tomorrow. At Evergreen, even Mrs. Peterson noticed her improved mood. "You're glowing today," the elderly woman observed. "Is it that young man you mentioned?" "Maybe," Naomi admitted, helping her into a comfortable position in her chair. "He's different." "Different is good," Mrs. Peterson nodded approvingly. "Tell me about him." Naomi found herself talking about Elias, his kindness, his interest in history and architecture, the way he listened as if every word she said mattered. She carefully avoided mentioning his wealth or background, focusing instead on the person beneath the Carrington name. "He sounds wonderful," Mrs. Peterson said when Naomi finished. "When do I get to meet him?" "It's still very new," Naomi hedged. "I don't want to rush things." "At my age, dear, everything seems rushed," Mrs. Peterson chuckled. "Don't wait too long to grab happiness when it comes your way." Naomi thought about those words as she left Evergreen that evening. Happiness had been elusive in her life, always something she was working toward rather than something she possessed. But these past 2 days with Elias, despite the complicated beginning, had brought her more joy than she'd felt in years. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the sleek black car parked across from Evergreen or the elegant woman watching her through tinted windows. Inside the car, Vivian Carrington lowered her binoculars, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the leather seat. "So that's her," she said to the driver. "The woman my brother's been spending all his time with." "Yes, Miss Carrington," the driver confirmed. "Miss Brooks. She works as a caregiver here and at a cafe called Sunshine." Vivian's lips curled in a cold smile. How quaint. A waitress and a nurse's aide. Elias always did have a weakness for charity cases. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the photos her investigator had sent. Naomi and Elias at Fat Joe's, walking down the street hand in hand, the gentle kiss outside Naomi's apartment building. "Drive me to the hotel, Robert," she instructed. "I need to prepare for my meeting with my brother tomorrow." "Yes, Miss Carrington." As the car pulled away, Vivian took one last look at Naomi's retreating figure. "Enjoy it while it lasts, Miss Brooks," she murmured. "My brother may be infatuated, but he knows where his responsibilities lie, and they're not with someone like you." Across town, unaware of his sister's arrival in Detroit, Elias was standing in a large, elegant room looking out over the city lights. The house had been his mother's childhood home, a beautiful old Victorian, in what had once been one of Detroit's most prestigious neighborhoods. His phone buzzed with a text from Naomi. "Looking forward to tomorrow." "Good night." Elias smiled, typing back, "Sweet dreams, Naomi." He turned back to the room, seeing it with new eyes. The ornate moldings, the wide windows, the warm wooden floors. This was the surprise he wanted to show Naomi tomorrow, a piece of Detroit's history and a piece of his mother's heart. What he didn't know was that his sister had other plans. Plans that would test the fragile connection growing between him and Naomi in ways neither of them could imagine. Naomi woke early the next morning, butterflies dancing in her stomach at the thought of seeing Elias again. She tried on 3 different outfits before settling on a simple sundress, casual enough for comfort, but pretty enough to make her feel confident. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tasha. "Still waiting to hear about this mystery man who stole my blind date setup. Brunch tomorrow, you owe me details." Naomi smiled, typing back, "Deal, lots to tell." At precisely 10 o'clock, a knock sounded at her door. Naomi took a deep breath, checked her appearance one last time in the mirror, and opened the door. Elias stood there in jeans and a light blue button-down shirt, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. His smile when he saw her made the butterflies in her stomach multiply. "These are for you," he said, handing her the flowers. "I remembered you mentioned liking wildflowers better than roses." "They're beautiful," Naomi said, genuinely touched that he'd remembered that small detail from their conversations. "Come in while I put them in water." Elias stepped into her apartment, looking around with interest but not judgment. Naomi was suddenly aware of how small and modest her place was compared to what he must be used to. The mismatched furniture, the patched curtains, the water stain on the ceiling that the landlord kept promising to fix. "It's not much," she said, filling a mason jar with water for the flowers. "It's nice," Elias replied. "It feels like you." "Small and a little worn around the edges?" Naomi joked. "Warm, genuine, no pretense." His eyes met hers. "I like it." The simple sincerity in his voice made her blush. "So what's this surprise place you want to show me?" "You'll see." His eyes twinkled with anticipation. "Ready to go?" They drove through Detroit, away from Naomi's neighborhood and into an area that had once been grand, but had fallen into decline over the decades. Beautiful old homes with intricate architecture stood alongside abandoned properties and vacant lots. Elias pulled up in front of a large Victorian house that stood out from its neighbors. Though clearly old, it had been maintained, its pale yellow, paint fresh, its wraparound porch inviting. "What is this place?" Naomi asked as they got out of the car. "It was my mother's childhood home," Elias explained, a note of reverence in his voice. "She grew up here until she was 18 and went east for college. That's where she met my father." He led her up the steps to the porch, unlocking the front door with an old-fashioned key. She never sold it, even after her parents passed away. She'd come back a few times a year, sometimes bringing me and Vivian when we were kids. After she died, it came to me in her will. The interior of the house was like stepping back in time. High ceilings with ornate moldings, hardwood floors. That gleamed with age and polish, antique furniture that had clearly been chosen with care. "It's beautiful," Naomi breathed, turning slowly to take it all in. "My mother loved this house," Elias said softly. "She always said it was the only place she felt truly at home, even after decades in New York and Europe." He gave her a tour, showing her the formal dining room with its crystal chandelier, the cozy library lined with books, the sunroom that overlooked a garden wild with summer blooms. "This was her favorite room," Elias said as they entered a bright space at the back of the house. Large windows let in streams of sunlight, illuminating a baby grand piano and comfortable seating arranged to enjoy the garden view. "She played?" Naomi asked, running her fingers lightly over the piano keys. "Beautifully, she taught me a little." Elias sat on the bench, playing a simple melody. "Not very well, as you can hear." "Better than I could do," Naomi laughed. "But you sing," Elias reminded her. "You told me at Fat Joe's." "I'm not singing for you today," she warned, though the idea wasn't as intimidating as it might have been a few days ago. "One day," he said, his eyes holding a promise that made her heart beat faster. They continued through the house, ending up in the kitchen, a charming blend of vintage features and modern appliances. "Hungry?" Elias asked, opening the refrigerator to reveal an array of prepared foods. "I had some things delivered. Thought we could have lunch in the garden." "You thought of everything," Naomi said, helping him arrange food on plates. They ate at a small table in the garden, surrounded by roses and hydrangeas that had clearly been tended recently. "Do you come here often?" Naomi asked. "More since I've been back in Detroit. There's a caretaker who looks after the place year-round, but I've been spending time here, trying to decide what to do with it." "And? Have you decided?" Elias looked around the garden, his expression thoughtful. "My sister wants me to sell it. The neighborhood is starting to gentrify, and she says we could make a significant return on investment." The air quotes around the phrase made his feelings clear. "But you don't want to sell?" "No, this house meant everything to my mother. She kept it all these years for a reason." He met Naomi's eyes. "I've been thinking about what you said, about finding a balance, doing something that benefits the community. And I'm considering turning it into a community center. Art classes for kids, job training, maybe a small library branch. This neighborhood doesn't have much in the way of resources." Naomi felt a surge of warmth toward him. "That sounds wonderful, Elias." "You think so?" "It's just an idea at this point. I think your mother would be proud." She reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "It honors her connection to this place while giving something back." His fingers interlaced with hers. "That's exactly what I was hoping for." They spent the afternoon exploring the house and grounds, Elias sharing stories of his childhood visits, Naomi offering ideas for the community center. There was an ease between them that felt both new and familiar, as if they'd known each other far longer than a few days. As the afternoon light began to fade, they sat together on the porch swing, shoulders touching, watching the neighborhood children playing in the street. "Thank you for showing me this place," Naomi said softly. "It means a lot that you wanted to share it with me. I knew you'd understand why it's special." Elias turned to face her. "Naomi, I know we haven't known each other long, but these past few days, I've never felt this way about anyone before." Her heart quickened. "Neither have I," she admitted. "It's a little scary." "Terrifying," he agreed with a small smile. "Hey, especially given how we met." "You mean when you let me believe you were my blind date?" she teased. "Not my finest moment." He had the grace to look sheepish. "But I can't regret it, because it led to this." He leaned forward slowly, giving her Time to pull away if she wanted to. But Naomi met him halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened with a hunger that surprised them both. When they finally broke apart, Naomi was breathless, her pulse racing. The way Elias looked at her, like she was something precious, something to be treasured, made her feel both powerful and vulnerable. "I should get you home," he said reluctantly, his voice husky, "before I forget my manners entirely." The drive back to Naomi's apartment was quiet, a pleasant tension humming between them. Elias held her hand across the console, his thumb tracing circles on her skin. Outside her building, he walked her to the door. "Can I see you tomorrow?" "I have brunch with Tasha," Naomi said. "But I'm free after that. I'll call you." He kissed her again, a brief but tender touch that left her wanting more. Naomi watched him drive away, a smile playing on her lips. Whatever this was between them, it felt real, important, worth protecting. She had no idea that forces were already aligning to tear it apart. The next morning, Elias sat in his hotel suite, reviewing documents for a board meeting that evening. His phone buzzed with a text from Naomi, a photo of her and Tasha at brunch, Naomi's smile bright enough to light up the screen. Being interrogated about the mystery man who stole Tasha's blind date setup. "You're causing quite a stir." He smiled. Typing back, "Hope I'm worth the interrogation. Can't wait to see you later." A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Without waiting for a response, the door opened, and Vivian Carrington swept into the room. At 32, Vivian was the picture of polished perfection, sleek dark hair cut in an expensive bob, designer suit that probably cost more than most, people's monthly rent, red-soled stilettos that announced her status with every step. "Elias," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Surprise?" Elias stood, genuinely startled. "Vivian, what are you doing in Detroit?" "The better question is, what are you doing in Detroit?" She glanced pointedly at his phone, where Naomi's picture was still visible. "Or perhaps I should ask who you're doing in Detroit." "Don't start," Elias warned, slipping his phone into his pocket. "The board meeting is tonight," Vivian continued as if he hadn't spoken. "The lawyers have been trying to reach you for days about Mother's estate, and instead of handling your responsibilities, you've been playing tourist with some cafe waitress." The contempt in her voice when she said waitress made Elias's jaw tighten. "Her name is Naomi, and she's more than just a waitress." "Oh, I know all about Naomi Brooks." Vivian pulled a folder from her designer handbag, dropping it on the coffee table. 27, grew up with her grandmother after her parents died, in a car accident, dropped out of nursing school to care for said grandmother during her final illness, works 2 minimum-wage jobs, lives in a building with 3 health code violations. She arched a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Did I miss anything?" Elias stared at the folder, then at his sister. "You had her investigated?" "Someone had to look out for the family interests while you were busy slumming it. Don't you dare talk about her like that," Elias said, his voice low and dangerous. "And don't pretend this is about family interests. This is about control. Your control," Vivian sighed dramatically. "Elias, be realistic. What exactly do you think is going to happen with this woman? You'll bring her to New York? Introduce her at the Met Gala? Have her pour coffee for the board members?" "Stop it. You know I'm right. She doesn't fit in our world, and you don't fit in hers. This little vacation romance might be amusing now, but it has no future." Elias ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Not everything is about our world, Vivian. Maybe I don't want that world anymore. Maybe I want something real." "Real?" Vivian laughed, the sound like glass breaking. "What's real is the $100 million deal waiting for your signature. What's real is the responsibility you have to the company, to our employees, to our father's legacy." "I'm not abandoning my responsibilities. I'm questioning whether they're the only things that should matter in my life." Vivian's expression softened slightly, a calculated shift that Elias recognized all too well. "I understand you're still grieving, Mother. We both are. But this distraction isn't healthy." "Naomi isn't a distraction. She's—" Elias paused, searching for words that wouldn't give his sister more ammunition. "She's important to me." "You've known her for what, 4 days?" Vivian shook her head. This isn't like you, Elias. You're the thoughtful one, the planner. You don't fall for waitresses you've just met. Maybe that's the problem, Elias countered. Maybe I've been too thoughtful, too careful. Maybe I've been living the life everyone expected of me instead of the one I want. Vivian's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression hardening. The lawyers are waiting. Are you coming to this meeting or not? Elias looked at his own phone, where Naomi's smiling face had brightened his morning just minutes ago. I'll be there, he said finally. But this conversation isn't over. Of course not, Vivian agreed, her tone making it clear she thought otherwise. The car will pick you up at 6. After she left, Elias stood at the window, looking out at the Detroit skyline. His sister's words, though harsh, had voiced the doubts lurking at the edges of his own mind. Could he and Naomi really bridge the gap between their worlds? Was he being fair to her, pursuing something that might have no future? He thought of the afternoon at his mother's house, how right it had felt to share that place with Naomi, how she'd understood instinctively what it meant to him. That wasn't something he could just walk away from. His phone buzzed with a text from Naomi. Finished with brunch. Tasha has officially given you her stamp of approval, based solely on how happy I look. Elias smiled despite his troubled thoughts. I'm glad to have her approval. Dinner tonight? I'd like that, but I have to work at Evergreen until 8. I'll pick you up after. There's a board meeting I can't miss, but it should be done by then. Sounds perfect. Good luck with your meeting. Elias put his phone away, his resolve strengthening. Vivian was wrong. What he felt for Naomi wasn't a vacation fling or a rebellion against his responsibilities. It was something true, something worth fighting for. And fight he would, starting with the board meeting tonight. Naomi hummed to herself as she helped. Mrs. Peterson, get ready for dinner. The elderly woman noticed her good mood immediately. You're glowing again, she observed. That young man of yours must be something special. He is, Naomi admitted, adjusting Mrs. Peterson's cardigan. We're having dinner tonight after my shift. Bring him to meet me next time, Mrs. Peterson instructed. I want to see this miracle worker for myself. Naomi laughed. He's not a miracle worker. He's made you smile more in a week than I've seen. In the 2 years you've been caring for me. That's miracle enough for an old woman like me. As Naomi wheeled Mrs. Peterson toward the dining room, she noticed a strikingly elegant woman speaking with the facility director near the entrance. The woman's designer clothing and perfectly styled hair seemed out of place in the modest surroundings of Evergreen. Who's that? Mrs. Peterson asked, following Naomi's gaze. I don't know, Naomi replied. Probably a new resident's family member. She settled Mrs. Peterson at her usual table and went to help other residents, forgetting about the elegant visitor, until she heard her name called. Miss Brooks, a moment of your time? Naomi turned to see the woman approaching, a professional smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes. Yes. Can I help you? Vivian Carrington, the woman said, extending a manicured hand. Elias's sister. Naomi's stomach dropped. Oh, it's nice to meet you. Elias has mentioned you. Has he? Vivian's smile remained fixed. How flattering. I wonder if I might have a word in private. It won't take long. Naomi glanced at the clock. She still had an hour left on her shift. I'm working right now, but I've already spoken with your supervisor. She's given permission for a short break. Vivian's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. All right, Naomi agreed reluctantly. We can talk in the garden. It's usually quiet this time of evening. She led Vivian to a small courtyard garden where residents often sat during the day. Now, as dusk approached, it was empty. The only sound, the gentle splashing of a small fountain. What can I do for you, Miss Carrington? Naomi asked, trying to keep her voice polite, despite the unease growing in her stomach. Please call me Vivian. The woman sat gracefully on a bench, gesturing for Naomi to join her. I wanted to meet the woman who's captured my brother's attention so completely. There was something in her tone, a subtle condescension, that put Naomi immediately on guard. I'm not sure captured is the right word. No. He's missed important meetings, ignored calls from our lawyers, been distracted during business discussions, all since meeting you. Vivian studied Naomi with cool assessment. You must be quite special. I think that's for Elias to decide. Naomi said carefully, Of course. Vivian smiled again, that same smile that never reached her eyes. My brother has always had a romantic streak. He gets it from our mother. He speaks very fondly of her. Yes, they were close, which is why her death hit him so hard. Vivian's voice softened with what might have been genuine emotion. He's vulnerable right now, you understand. Grief can make people do things they wouldn't normally do, make connections that might not be unsustainable. Naomi felt her cheeks flush. Are you suggesting that Elias is only interested in me because he's grieving? I'm saying that grief can complicate emotions. Vivian's gaze was direct now, all pretense of warmth gone. Elias has responsibilities to our family, to our company, to the hundreds of employees who depend on us. Responsibilities he can't fulfill from Detroit. I've never asked him to stay here, Naomi said, her own voice hardening. I've never asked him for anything. Not yet, Vivian agreed. But relationships evolve, don't they? Expectations grow. Compromises become necessary. What exactly are you trying to say? Vivian reached into her handbag and withdrew an envelope. Inside is a check for $50,000, she said matter-of-factly. It's yours, no strings attached, if you agree to end things with my brother. Naomi stared at the envelope, shock and anger battling for dominance. You're trying to buy me off? I prefer to think of it as compensation for your time. Vivian's voice was cool. You've shown Elias a brief escape from his grief, and perhaps that was what he needed, but it's time for him to return to reality, to his real life. And I'm not part of that real life? Naomi stood, anger winning out. You don't know anything about me or about what's between Elias and me. I know more than you think, Vivian countered. I know about the medical bills that forced you to drop out of nursing school. I know about the second mortgage on your grandmother's house that you're still paying off despite having to sell the property. I know about the dream you had of opening a small care facility for dementia patients. Naomi felt as if the air had been knocked from her lungs. How could this woman know such personal details of her life? $50,000 could change your life, Naomi, Vivian continued, her voice gentler now, almost sympathetic. It could clear your debts, give you a fresh start, maybe even get you back into nursing school. For one shameful moment, Naomi found herself calculating what that money could do, the freedom it would bring, the possibilities it would open. Then she thought of Elias's face when he'd shown her his mother's house, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her, the feeling of his hand in hers. Keep your money, Naomi said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Whatever happens between me and Elias is for us to decide, not you. Vivian sighed, returning the envelope to her bag. I was afraid you'd say that. You seem like a woman of principle, which I respect. She stood, smoothing her already perfect skirt. But principles don't pay bills, Naomi, and they don't bridge the gap between different worlds. Maybe not, Naomi agreed. But they let me sleep at night. Consider my offer, Vivian said, handing Naomi a business card. It remains open for the next 48 hours. After that, she shrugged elegantly. Well, we'll see where things stand. With that, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking precisely on the stone path. Naomi stood in the garden long after Vivian had gone, the business card clutched in her hand, her thoughts in turmoil. If Elias's sister had gone to such lengths, to investigate her, to try to buy her off, what did that say about how the rest of his world would view their relationship? For the first time since meeting Elias, doubt crept in like a shadow, dimming the bright hope that had been growing in her heart. Elias sat at the boardroom table, his mind only half on the meeting taking place around him. Lawyers droned on about estate taxes and property transfers while he thought of Naomi, her smile, her honesty, the way she'd looked in the sunlight at his mother's house. Mr. Carrington, your signature is needed on these documents. Elias pulled himself back to the present, accepting the pen a lawyer handed him. The document before him detailed the transfer of his mother's Detroit properties to Carrington Luxury Development, the first step in Vivian's plan to convert them into upscale condominiums. Wait, he said, putting down the pen. I'm not ready to sign this. Vivian, sitting across the table, tensed visibly. Elias, we've discussed this. The board has already approved the development plan. The board approved exploring options, Elias corrected. And I've been doing exactly that. I'm considering alternative uses for the properties, particularly my mother's house. What kind of alternative uses? One of the board members asked. Community-focused development. A center for arts education? Job training? Resources that would benefit the existing neighborhood rather than displacing it. Vivian's smile was tight. That's a lovely thought, Elias, but hardly profitable. Not everything is about profit, Elias argued. These properties were important to our mother. She kept them for a reason. I think we owe it to her memory to consider what she would have wanted. What she would have wanted? Vivian's voice rose slightly. Mother was a businesswoman, same as father. She understood the value of strategic investment. She was also someone who cared about her hometown, Elias countered, who never forgot where she came from even after decades in New York and Europe. The board members exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the tension between the siblings. Perhaps we should table this discussion, suggested Mr. Winters, the eldest board member and a friend of their father's. Give Mr. Carrington time to develop his alternative proposal. Vivian looked like she wanted to object, but instead nodded, stiffly. Fine, 2 weeks, then we make a decision and move forward. The meeting adjourned shortly after, the lawyers gathering their documents, the board members making polite farewells. Vivian caught Elias's arm as he prepared to leave. You're making a mistake, she said quietly. This sudden interest in community development, it's because of her, isn't it? This waitress has filled your head with idealistic nonsense. Her name is Naomi, Elias said firmly. And yes, she's helped me see things differently. But these are my decisions, Vivian. Mine, not yours, not the board's, and not father's ghosts. You've changed, Vivian said, a note of genuine concern in her voice. In just a few days you've become someone I barely recognize. Maybe I'm finally becoming myself, Elias replied. He checked his watch. I have to go. I'm meeting Naomi for dinner. Vivian's expression hardened. About that, there's something you should know. A chill ran down Elias's spine. What did you do? I met with your Naomi today, Vivian said calmly. Woman to woman, I wanted to understand what she wants from you. You had no right, Elias said, his voice dangerously quiet. No right at all. I have every right to protect our family's interests, our father's legacy. What exactly did you say to her? Vivian hesitated, then lifted her chin defiantly. I offered her money to end things with you. Elias felt as if he'd been punched. You did what? $50,000. A generous offer, I thought. My God, Vivian. Elias ran a hand through his hair, his face pale with anger and shock. How could you? It was a test, Vivian said defensively. I needed to know if she was after your money. And? She turned it down. Vivian sounded almost disappointed. Rather dramatically, I might add. She seems quite attached to her principles. Despite his anger, Elias felt a surge of pride. Of course Naomi had refused the money. Of course she had stood her ground against Vivian's manipulation. So you've gone too far this time, he said, grabbing his jacket. Stay away from Naomi, stay away from me, and don't touch Mother's properties until we've resolved this properly. He strode from the room, pulling out his phone to call Naomi, but, as he waited for her to answer, a terrible thought struck him. What if Vivian's test had changed things? What if Naomi, understandably furious at being treated like a gold digger, wanted nothing more to do with him or his family? The call went to voicemail. Elias's heart sank as he left a message. Naomi, it's me. I just found out about my sister's visit. I'm so sorry. Please call me back, please. He hurried to his car, determined to drive to Evergreen and explain in person. As he pulled out of the parking garage, he didn't notice the photographer across the street, capturing his image through a telephoto lens. The photographer checked the shot on his digital screen, then made a call. Got him, he reported. Heading east from the Riverside building. You want me to follow? No need, replied a female voice. I know exactly where he's going. Naomi sat on a bench outside Evergreen, waiting for Elias. Her shift had ended 20 minutes ago, But she'd needed the time alone to collect her thoughts after Vivian's visit. The business card was still in her pocket, a physical reminder of the gulf between her world and Elias's. $50,000, more money than she'd ever had at once, enough to change the course of her life. And to Vivian Carrington it was pocket change, a small price to pay to remove an inconvenience from her brother's life. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Elias and a voicemail she hadn't yet listened to. Part of her wanted to cancel dinner, to take time to process what had happened, but a stronger part needed to see him, to look into his eyes and remind herself that what they had was real, regardless of his sister's interference. A car pulled up to the curb. Not Elias's sleek luxury vehicle, but a taxi. Elias emerged, his expression anxious as he scanned the entrance and spotted her. "Naomi," he said, hurrying to her side. "I'm so sorry about Vivian. I just found out what she did." "You took a taxi," Naomi observed, the detail somehow important. "I was afraid you wouldn't answer my calls. I didn't want to waste time parking." He sat beside her on the bench, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Vivian had no right to approach you like that, to offer you money. It's unforgivable." "Is it?" Naomi asked quietly. "Or is it just how your world works? Problems handled with checkbooks instead of conversations?" Elias winced. "That's not my world, Naomi. Not the one I choose anyway. But it is the world you come from, the one you'll return to when your business in Detroit is finished." She met his eyes directly. "Your sister made that very clear." "Vivian doesn't speak for me," Elias said firmly. "Yes, I have responsibilities in New York, but that doesn't mean—" He paused, searching for words. "It doesn't mean this isn't real. What I feel for you." "And what do you feel?" Naomi asked, her heart pounding. "I think I'm falling in love with you," Elias said simply. "I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. But it's true." The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Naomi felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted softly, "and it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because your sister is right about—" "One thing," Naomi said. "We come from different worlds, worlds that don't easily mix." "They can," Elias insisted, taking her hand. "If we want them to." "Can they? Really?" Naomi squeezed his hand but didn't quite meet his eyes. "Your sister offered me $50,000 to walk away from you. That's more money than I'll make in 2 years, Elias. And to her, it's nothing. That's the gap between our worlds." Elias's expression darkened. "Vivian has always thought she could buy solutions to problems. But you're not a problem to be solved, Naomi. You're the most real thing in my life right now." Despite herself, Naomi smiled. "That's a pretty good line." "It's not a line," Elias said earnestly. "It's the truth. These past few days with you have made me question everything. What I want, who I want to be, what really matters." He moved closer, his free hand gently turning her face toward his. "And you know what I've realized? You matter. Us, together, that matters." Naomi wanted desperately to believe him, to believe that love really could bridge the chasm between their lives. "What happens when you go back to New York?" she asked, the question that had been haunting her since Vivian's visit. "I don't know," Elias admitted. "But I do know I'm not ready to let this end. We can figure it out together if you want to." The honesty in his eyes, the warmth of his hand on hers, the memory of how right it had felt to be with him at his mother's house, all of it pushed back against the doubts Vivian had planted. "I want to," Naomi said finally. "But no more secrets, Elias, no more half-truths. If we're going to try to make this work, I need to know I can trust you completely." "No more secrets," he agreed solemnly. "I promise." He leaned forward, and Naomi met him halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that felt like a seal on their agreement, a promise of honesty and hope. Neither of them noticed the flash of a camera from across the street, capturing their embrace, in perfect clarity. 3 days later, Naomi was at Sunshine Cafe serving the morning rush when she noticed customers giving her strange looks. A group of women at the corner table kept glancing her way, whispering behind their hands. Even Gloria was acting oddly, hovering nearby with concerned eyes. "Is there something on my face?" Naomi finally asked, after the third customer did a double-take upon seeing her. "Oh, honey," Gloria said, pulling her aside. "You haven't seen it, have you?" "Seen what?" Gloria took out her phone, tapping the screen a few times before handing it to Naomi. "It's all over social media this morning." Naomi looked at the screen and felt the blood drain from her face. There, on a popular gossip site, was a photo of her and Elias kissing outside Evergreen. The headline read, "Carrington airs secret Detroit romance with cafe waitress." The article beneath was worse, detailing her jobs, her financial struggles, even mentioning her grandmother's house. It portrayed her as a gold digger who had ensnared the vulnerable billionaire as he mourned his mother's death. And there, quoted directly, was a source close to the Carrington family expressing concern about opportunistic individuals taking advantage of Elias during this difficult time. Naomi's hands shook as she handed the phone back to Gloria. "I need to make a call," she said, her voice barely audible. In the back room, she dialed Elias's number, her heart pounding. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again with the same result. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tasha. "OMG, girl, you're famous. Call me now." Then another text, this one from an unknown number. "Miss Brooks, this is Robert, Mr. Carrington's assistant. Mr. Carrington asked me to inform you that he is in an emergency board meeting regarding the situation. He will contact you as soon as possible." Naomi stared at the text, a cold feeling spreading through her chest. An emergency board meeting about their relationship? Was she a crisis to be managed now? She returned to the front of the cafe, aware of the stairs following her, the whispers just loud enough to catch fragments. "Can't believe it's her. Probably after his money. Won't last once he comes to his senses." Gloria put a protective arm around her shoulders. "Why don't you take the day off, honey? I can cover your shift." "No," Naomi said, lifting her chin. "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm not going to hide." But as the morning wore on, the stares and whispers continued. Her phone buzzed constantly with texts from friends and even acquaintances she hadn't heard from in years, all wanting to know about her billionaire boyfriend. By noon, a reporter had shown up at the cafe, asking Gloria for just a quick word with Naomi about her relationship with Elias Carrington. Gloria chased him out with a broom, but the damage was done. Naomi's private life had become public spectacle, all because she'd fallen for a man whose last name carried more weight than she'd realized. Still, no call from Elias. As her shift ended, Naomi checked her phone one more time. Nothing. She stepped outside to find another reporter waiting, this one with a photographer in tow. "Miss Brooks, can we get a comment on your relationship with Elias Carrington? How did you meet? Is it true you're living in his mother's old house?" Naomi pushed past them without answering, head down, fighting back tears. This was Vivian's doing, she was sure of it. The source close to the family had to be her, trying another tactic to drive a wedge between Elias and Naomi, when money hadn't worked. But where was Elias? Why hadn't he called? Did the emergency board meeting mean his family had convinced him to end things? Had all his talk about love and figuring things out together been just that, talk? By the time Naomi reached her apartment, she was exhausted, her emotions a tangle of hurt, anger, and confusion. She closed the door behind her, leaning against it as tears finally spilled down her cheeks. On her kitchen counter, Elias's wildflowers were beginning to wilt, a sad metaphor for what might have been the most beautiful thing to enter her life in years. Her phone buzzed again, another text, this one from Elias himself. "Naomi, I'm so sorry about all of this. The article, the photos, everything. It's not what you deserve. Can we talk, please?" Naomi stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the reply button. What was there to say? That she'd been naive to think their worlds could merge. That she'd fallen too hard, too fast, for a man whose life was so different from her own? Or that despite everything, the publicity, the whispers, Vivian's interference, she still wanted to try? Before she could decide, there was a knock at her door. Wiping her tears, Naomi looked through the peephole to see Elias standing in the hallway, his expression a mixture of hope and fear. The moment of truth had arrived. Naomi took a deep breath and opened the door. Elias stood in the hallway, his normally perfect appearance disheveled, hair mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly, tie loosened, dark circles under his eyes. "I tried calling," he said. "I'm so sorry about all of this." Naomi stepped back to let him in, her emotions too tangled to speak. She closed the door behind him and leaned against it, arms crossed protectively over her chest. "How bad is it?" she asked finally. "Bad." Elias ran a hand through his already messy hair. "It's all over social media. The board called an emergency meeting. Vivian is—" He shook his head. "Vivian is being Vivian, meaning she's blaming me. She's trying to spin this as some kind of PR crisis." Elias's voice was bitter, as if falling. In love is something that needs damage control. Despite everything, Naomi's heart skipped at his casual use of love. "Is that what you told the board? That you've fallen in love?" Elias met her eyes directly. "Yes, I told them I've met someone important to me, someone who's helping me see things differently, and that my personal life is not up for discussion or approval." "And how did that go over?" "About as well as you'd expect." He attempted a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "The older board members were scandalized. The younger ones thought it was great publicity." Vivian nearly had an aneurysm. Naomi sank onto her couch, suddenly exhausted. "People were staring at me all day, whispering." A reporter showed up at the cafe. Elias sat beside her, leaving a careful distance between them. "I'm so sorry, Naomi. This isn't what you signed up for." "No, it isn't." She looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I'm a private person, Elias. I don't want my life splashed across gossip sites. I don't want to be labeled a gold digger or have my financial struggles dissected by strangers." "I know." He reached for her hand, relief visible when she didn't pull away. "I'll fix this, I promise." "How?" "You can't put this genie back in the bottle." "No, but I can control the narrative." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "We can issue a statement, set the record straight. Or we can ignore it, refuse to feed the story. Eventually they'll move on to the next scandal." Naomi considered this, trying to imagine her life under this kind of scrutiny. Would it ever feel normal? Could she adapt to being Elias Carrington's girlfriend instead of just Naomi Brooks? "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted softly. "Live in this fishbowl, be judged by people who don't know me." Fear flashed across Elias's face. "Are you saying you want to end things?" "I'm saying I don't know how to navigate this world you live in, where family members offer bribes and private investigators dig up your financial history and photographers follow you around." "That's not my world," Elias insisted. "Not the one I choose. That's Vivian's world, my father's world. I've been trying to find my own path, my own values. And meeting you—" he squeezed her hand. "Meeting you has made everything clearer." "What do you mean?" "I mean that what matters isn't the company or the money or what the board thinks. What matters is being true to myself and the people I care about." His eyes held hers. "And I care about you, Naomi, more than I thought possible after such a short time." The sincerity in his voice made her resolve waver. "I care about you too. But caring isn't always enough. Sometimes practical realities get in the way." "Like what?" "The fact that I have money and you don't? The fact that I live in New York and you live here?" Elias shook his head. "Those aren't insurmountable obstacles, they're just details." "Pretty significant details," Naomi countered. "Only if we let them be." Elias moved closer, taking both her hands in his. "Look, I'm not saying it will be easy, but nothing worth having ever is. My mother used to tell me that." The mention of his mother seemed to shift something in the air between them. Naomi remembered how he'd looked showing her his mother's house, the passion in his voice when he talked about preserving her legacy. "What would she think?" Naomi asked. "About us?" A soft smile touched Elias's lips. "She would have loved you. My mother valued authenticity above all else. It's why she kept her childhood home, why she came back to Detroit regularly even after decades away. She never forgot where she came from." His thumb brushed a tear from Naomi's cheek. "She would have seen in you what I see, a woman of principle, of compassion, of genuine strength." The words wrapped around Naomi's heart, warming her despite her fears. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. He rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Naomi Brooks. The question is, are you willing to take this leap with me, complications and all? She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of him so close, the sincerity in his touch, his, against all logic, all self-preservation, she knew her answer. Yes, she whispered. God help me, yes. His lips found hers, gentle at first, then with growing intensity as relief and joy flooded through them both. When they finally broke apart, Elias was smiling, a real smile that lit his eyes. We'll figure this out, he promised, together. For the first time since seeing that terrible article, Naomi felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they could navigate this. Maybe love really was enough. She had no idea how quickly that hope would be tested. The next morning, Naomi woke to the sound of her phone buzzing insistently. It was Tasha, calling for the third time in an hour. Have you seen it? Her friend demanded the moment Naomi answered. Seen what? Naomi asked groggily, glancing at the clock. It was barely 7. The new article. Oh my God, Naomi, it's everywhere. Fully awake now, Naomi sat up. What article? Check your email. I sent you. The link. It's... Just look at it. Naomi fumbled for her laptop, dread building in her stomach. With trembling fingers, she clicked the link Tasha had sent. The headline made her blood run cold. Exclusive. The truth about Elias Carrington's cafe waitress. Family history of financial schemes and desperate grabs for money. The article was worse than she could have imagined. It detailed her father's gambling problems before his death, claiming he'd been involved in illegal betting. It mentioned a distant cousin who'd been convicted of insurance fraud. It even dragged up an incident from her college days when a roommate had accused her of stealing, a claim that had been quickly disproven when the roommate found her missing jewelry in her own suitcase. But the most damaging part was the suggestion that Naomi had targeted Elias after learning his identity, portraying their meeting as calculated rather than coincidental. This is insane, Naomi whispered, her hand covering her mouth. None of this is true. I know that, Tasha said through the phone. Anyone who knows you knows that, but the whole world is reading this right now, Naomi finished, her voice hollow. She thought of Elias, who had left late last night after they'd talked for hours, making plans to weather this storm together. Had he seen this new article? What would he think? Her phone buzzed with another call, Elias. She switched over, her heart in her throat. Have you seen it? She asked without preamble. Yes. His voice was tight with controlled anger. Naomi, I swear to you, I'm going to fix this. I know who's behind it. Vivian, Naomi said, not a question but a certainty. Yes, this has her fingerprints all over it. She's always believed the best defense is a vicious offense. He paused. Naomi, none of this changes how I feel about you. You know that, right? She wanted to believe him, but doubt crept in, insidious and cold. How can it not? Your whole family, your board, probably all your friends are seeing this, reading these lies about me, about my family. I don't care what they think, Elias insisted. I care about the truth, and the truth is that you're the best thing that's happened to me in years. Naomi closed her eyes, wishing she could wrap herself in the warmth of his words, and shut out. The rest of the world. I need to go to work, she said finally. People are expecting me. Are you sure that's a good idea? With all this media attention. What else am I supposed to do? Hide? That would only make me look guilty, she took a deep breath. I haven't done anything wrong, Elias. I'm not going to act like I have. You're incredible, you know that? The admiration in his voice was palpable. Okay, but I'm coming with you. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Elias, you don't have to... Yes, I do. We're in this together, remember? 20 minutes. After he hung up, Naomi sat on the edge of her bed, her emotions swinging between gratitude for his support and fear of what awaited her outside. How many more reporters would be at the cafe today? How would Gloria react to this new article? What about the regulars who'd known her for years? By the time Elias arrived, Naomi had showered and dressed, her face carefully composed into what she hoped looked like dignified indifference, but inside she was trembling. Ready? Elias asked, taking her hand as they left her apartment. No, she admitted, but let's do this anyway.